Hey everybody, this is Josh McKinney, and I just want to welcome you to episode, what number is this? 50 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show. I knew what episode it was the whole time. I've worked really hard on episode 50 and the things that are going to go along with it. And what I mean by that, I told you guys, we have an awesome, really cool giveaway that I am so excited about. And it is my free ebook, Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. This is, I don't know if I've ever worked harder on anything, or creatively, at least. I've probably put more hours into a lot of other projects and a lot of other things. But creativity-wise, I don't know if I have ever worked harder on anything. I really did push this. I've really been working on this for a really long time now. It's a very, very short ebook, which was hard. That was the hardest part about this, was not making simplifying jiu-jitsu incredibly complicated, right? That's the toughest thing that we deal with in jiu-jitsu, is the overcomplication of jiu-jitsu. I just talked about it on Saturday, on Suck Less Saturday, that overcomplication is the biggest, it's like the biggest negative. It's the biggest problem that I think we face in jiu-jitsu today. And I hope that Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu can help solve it. So if you want a copy of Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu, or maybe you're not a big reader and you want to listen to it on an audiobook, it is at bjjsucks.com/simple. That is bjjsucks.com/simple. It was actually supposed to be on its own site, but we're still building that site right now, so we just had to put it up on bjjsucks.com. So like I told you guys, on top of this cool and free giveaway, we are doing the first installment. And I say first installment, I think we're going to continue doing this maybe every 50 episodes, maybe something like that. It might be fun, called the Perfect Practitioner, the first installment of the Perfect Practitioner. And what the idea is, it is not most likely going to be talking about, hey, this is how we work side control or something like that. The idea is we're looking for the missing pieces for the average competitor or the average practitioner in jiu-jitsu. And I think there can be a lot of missing pieces. There can be a lot of things that people have questions about. And so I want to take the Perfect Practitioner idea and zone in on people that I think are quote unquote experts about something specific and just talk to them about that. It's less interview format and more of them trying to explain format. But of course, we're always going to joke. We're always going to laugh. That's just how the podcast is. And I have some really cool people and someone brand new for you guys. Two of the people that are going to be interviewed today are people that have had episodes on the show. Actually, two of them have had 2 episodes each on this show. And then I have a new super secret special guest. I guess if you just read the description, you would know who that is. But if not, you wouldn't. So the first person that I have talking about the Perfect Practitioner is one of my favorite people on the planet. My longest training partner, Steve McKinney, my dad. We are going to talk about nutrition. He's been on before, and we were very strength focused, and we talked about, I say nutrition, we more talk about recovery, but the game plan was nutrition, but we look at the things that go into recovery that aren't just nutrition. And so I think you guys are really going to enjoy it. At the end of his segment, I'll jump back in and I'll introduce the next guest, and we will go from there. So like I said, if you guys didn't check it out already, bjjsucks.com/simple. Be sure to get your copy of the ebook or audiobook. And without further ado, here is the first interview. Steve, how are you doing today?
Good, bro. How are you?
I'm good. So, as I told you before, I wanted to have you on. We are doing an episode 50 special called The Perfect Practitioner, where we are going to discuss really some of the missing pieces that a lot of people struggle with to make what we would consider the perfect jiu-jitsu practitioner. So we're not going to be super broad or super specifically focused where we're like, oh yeah, like somebody needs to play close guard to be great, right? We're going to be more of what are the people missing? What are people not getting? And I wanted to have you on to talk kind of, we'll call it strength and nutrition because usually we rope those two things together. But I guess the big thing that we would be talking about is what is missing for most people that they could be doing outside of training in regards to nutrition, in regards to supplements, in regards to strength.
Okay, cool. So what's really important, and I think is really the latest thing, okay? So people have been locked down for 7 weeks or so, okay? And here's one thing that came up that I thought was really interesting. You were in this as well. I had 4 different people who gained almost 10 pounds of muscle in that particular time. So what does that say? Why did that happen? And so yeah, I think it's just really interesting, and it really comes down to rest and recovery. I think that most people just don't get enough rest or recovery, and also sleep is huge, just for health as a whole. So just rest and recovery has to be the reason that I have like 4 different people, personal training clients, jiu-jitsu athletes who gained muscle by reducing the amount of work that they did. And so I think that most people don't realize how important that is. And I see this all the time. You're looking at the least amount of, like, for example, in strength and nutrition, the least amount of exercise to elicit a response, not the most. You don't have to kill your body every single time. And so that is one of the things that I've been looking at and concluding. It's that, most people don't get enough sleep, and they simply don't get enough rest. We have these schedules, okay? So, for example, I'm going to, lift on Monday and Thursday. I'm going to train jiu-jitsu Monday night, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, whatever the case may be. And then let's say that something comes up, you don't sleep well, but you're still going to go ahead with your plan. And to me, I think that throws you behind it. I don't think people realize how difficult it is to recover or to catch up once you're behind. So I think I think it's a big deal. I think it's a way bigger deal. If you like to start looking at sleep experts and brain health, man, you're going to see so many different things. Like I always said that the number one thing, for anti-aging was strength training. But I think that sleep is right there. I think that most people are underslept, if you can use that word.
Yeah, I think too, culturally, we probably have a system built on not sleeping, right? If you sleep too much, you're lazy. You look at, and this is actually specific. I remember this very well, being like 14 and 15 years old. And I had one of the few dads out of anybody that I knew that wasn't like, oh, you shouldn't be sleeping in so late. You're going to be, like you're going to be lazy, right? It was obviously at 15 years old, I was an athlete. I was doing jiu-jitsu so much, but nothing is worse, I think, for these young kids' bodies, minus head injuries. Nothing is worse in these sports than they're doing homework all night and then getting up for 6 a.m. football practices. And, there's a level of insanity in that, because you can't expect people not only to physically recover, but they can't be expected to mentally recover after these things. I mean, I know when I go into train and I am tired, everything feels slow. And it's not because my body is moving slow. It's because mentally my thought process is moving slow. So I'm not doing what I should.
Absolutely.
So here's kind of my question though. How do you know when you are getting enough sleep?
So here's the thing. Here's the one thing that you have to remember. Everyone has a particular cycle in which they feel best. Okay? So for me, I've naturally developed a kind of a system, or routine. So I'll start, I get up pretty early, but I wind my day down pretty early. I try to get to sleep between 9 and 9:30, and I generally get up about 6. So right in the 8.5 or so hours. And then what I find is I do my best work, like I do a lot of studying in the morning, do my best work early on. And my optimal training time for even for jujitsu and for lifting weights is right between the 10 and 11 o'clock, 10 to noon hours, right in there. That is, and so you have to figure out what is best for you, and you begin to understand your body. It's all experimentation and it's all individualization, but you will naturally begin to understand that. Like, for example, your mother she stays up later and she does her best work at night. It has to do with her rhythms, and she does most of her meetings and things and does well in the evening. Whereas for me, I don't train. And I noticed this years ago. We would go train at the gym, go to his squad, and I would get hurt a lot training at night. I have all these injuries. Man, I just don't feel good training at night. And so I just individualized mine and said, well, training at night's not a good idea.
Yeah.
So I train in the day, and then I begin to feel, experiment with the number of hours that I go through. And back to what you said earlier, I knew that years ago. I just knew, I read things and studied nutrition and sleep and what's the best way to go about your body. And each, as you're aging, growing, whatever the case may be, all those things they're individualized not only to the person, but to the age of the person as well. And I'd read where teenagers require a ton of sleep because they're growing, growth hormones up, your testosterone levels are up. You've got to allow that to happen. And so that's why I did those things. It's like those absolutely make sense to me.
I mean, I know that it is super important just from trial and error. I know that I can diet and I can feel good training, but I can't not sleep and then feel good training. The biggest jump that I have had in jiu-jitsu has been more recent, probably over the last year and some change. And it just so happens that is when I stopped being a personal trainer, and now I only teach jiu-jitsu. And so I train quite a bit, but I'm able to rest. I'm able to sleep in. There's no morning. The earliest morning that I have to get up is I have to be up on Saturdays to teach kids class at 9:30. And that is the only morning that I have to wake up at all. And so from that, it's been about a year and a half. But in the past 2 years, I've been sick one time. That's it. And I remember before that, especially when I first started teaching, I was around a bunch of little kids who were just cesspools filled with viruses and germs, and they'll just sneeze right in your mouth with no care in the world. Exactly. And so I'm around a bunch of kids, but I'm also waking up at like 4:30 every morning, and then working, and then I would try to take a nap and then come to the gym and teach and then train. And it's hard to fall asleep. So it became it's a really tough cycle to follow. It's a really tough, it's very tough to do. And I wouldn't even say that I was physically as beaten down or I was getting injured a lot, but my level of creativity in training went way up. My level of thinking about different training methods, learning how to train, it went way up, getting more sleep. So we know sleep is important, but something else people struggle with jiu-jitsu is like, what should they be eating?
Food works. So just a couple of thoughts on that. So I'm going to say that protein is super important. You're seeing more and more research on that having certain levels of protein. And so, man, jiu-jitsu is hard on your body. So I think that you should be like, for you, you might even look at, a pound, a gram per pound of body weight even. I'm sorry, a gram per pound of muscular body weight. So
okay,
you would know that through the body chem unit that we have to measure your muscle size.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be 150 to 160 grams per day.
Yeah.
So I think good quality protein is going to be super important for recovery and for muscle size. I just see that again and again. And then I think that genetically you have to experiment with your levels of carbohydrate that make you feel good. For example, I did a DNA test, and the DNA test came back to say that my optimal performance is when my carbohydrate levels are low. I don't do well with high carbohydrate levels. It does better when, and so, but I've always known that. So, I would have argued with the DNA test had it come back anything different than that.
Uh-huh.
And so once again, I go back to experimentation, but I think universally that you can look at protein as being a huge help. I think that's really important. And then when you think about that, and just to add to it, supplementation is important. And so looking at the COVID-19 and the fatalities caused by that, there's some studies done. And what you see with the studies is that the people who died, they did studies on their vitamin D levels were like through the floor. They were really, really low. And so I've been telling my clients, like, look, I just did a seminar for the Rotary Club, and I was just telling people to optimize your immune system, make sure you get enough sleep. You increase your immunity by lifting weights and doing proper exercise. But also, if you're going to take any supplementation, make sure that you take your vitamin D. You take vitamin D, because most people are low in vitamin D levels simply because they don't get enough sunshine, and so that's kind of like a big deal.
That's perfect. Thank you for being on. I know you have a private that you get to, and I also know that you would talk about this stuff all day.
Yeah, good, man. Yeah.
So we will kind of end it here. The last thing, though, because I know that this will be a question that people ask, and it can be answered really quickly. What DNA test did you do? What was that?
Fit DNA. I think it's called Fit DNA. Okay. It's in the UK. So if I come up as like a murderer for something and they found my DNA, that wasn't the best place to go then. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. Yeah. They planted you. Yeah. They framed you for a UK murder.
That evidence, man. So,
yeah.
I think it's in the UK, but it came back very, very cool. But it's like, it's really interesting. I'll just quickly finish off, but it says that I'm not sensitive to caffeine, moderately sensitive to salt. So all the things that because for me as a competitive bodybuilder years ago, I'm in tune with all those things. And so
it's something you discovered through trial and error, but it sounds like people could discover, like, almost fast track it by taking a test like that.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's cool. That's cool. And I'll be sure to research and make sure that it is Fit DNA. If it's not, I will let people know on the outro what it is. But thank you for being on. Have a great rest of your day.
See you, bro.
See ya. So that is my conversation with my dad. That is probably something that most jiu-jitsu people miss, is sleep. Most people in general probably miss sleep. And there's some different things you can do. You can try to get better sleep. And I am all for trying different stuff to get better sleep, because it's just so important, especially if you are an athlete. And I know you say, oh man, I'm not really an athlete, but if you do jiu-jitsu, you are an athlete. Whether you compete, whether you get paid for it, whatever, if you show up to practice, you're an athlete, and you should treat yourself as such. Sleep is one of the biggest deterrents of these big injuries. So many big injuries are caused from overworking and overtraining. And the biggest thing that happens with overworking and overtraining is undersleeping. It's even hard to sleep in those scenarios, in those situations. And so just something actually quick that I really like to do for getting sleep. And I talked to Adam Meredith, one of my buddies, on, I think it's going to be like episode 52 or 53 soon. One of the episodes coming up soon. We talk about how to get better sleep, and just my big quick tip on it is experimenting with different things, because so many people have their their thing that they do that helps them sleep. And it was funny because when Adam Meredith and I talk, we kind of actually have two different ideas of what helps us sleep, but it works for us. And so experiment and find what is going to help you with sleep. But maybe you feel like you struggle sleeping because you work full time or you're in school full time and you're trying to get to your black belt. You're trying to keep training jiu-jitsu. And so my next special guest is somebody who has done just that. This is one of my best friends, one of my closest training partners, a guy that I didn't realize what the length of it was until we did the interview, but I've trained with for over 9 years. And he's pretty much been like one of those guys that I think we all have him at the gym. When it's time to drill moves, you look over, that's the guy you drill with, right? Like that's always been one of my really close friendships and my best training partners. And his name is Justin Huff. We talk about it on the show, but I actually had the privilege to tie Justin Huff's black belt around him. He got it 4 months ago, and a little less than 4 months ago. I had the privilege to do that. It was through my coach, Kyle, but it was still, Justin trains at my gym. He's a coach at my gym. And so it was a really, really cool moment. I will find the YouTube video because we talk about it, and I think it's pretty cool, and we'll get it started. We'll get it going. But without further ado, Justin is going to come on and he's going to tell you, as somebody who earned his black belt while either being a full-time student or having a full-time job, he was able to get his black belt. And he is somebody that consistency, when we talk about how do you suck less at jiu-jitsu, most of the high-level black belts that we have on the show, they say, consistency, you just show up, consistency. I really don't think I know anybody that has exercised consistency as much as Justin, besides like my dad, right? But those two guys, like those two people that have on interviewing, just are the two most consistent people when it comes to training, showing up. And Justin is going to give some of his secrets as to what motivated him to keep doing that, and kind of looking back on now that he is a black belt, what's next. And so that is our next interview. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I promise, I know you guys will like it. Justin's just a likable guy. I promise I will get him on for a full interview sometime soon. Here he is. All right. So I'm sitting down with my good friend, fellow black belt, Justin Huff. So Justin, I was thinking before we started recording, and I couldn't think of it, how long have you and I been training together?
We've been training probably 9 years, I would say.
So I would have been a blue belt then when you first came to the hit squad. Is that right?
Yeah, you were a blue belt. Yep.
And so you had trained before that, like leading up to it, right?
Right. So I trained with Andy Sabins in Carbondale for probably about a year or so, and yeah. I mean, he basically set my roots in jiu-jitsu, and got me hooked on it.
What was the reason that you switched? Because you were at SIUC, which is, what is that, Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, and then you switched to their Edwardsville, I don't know, campus? Yeah, campus. I was going to say branch, but it's not a bank. So yes, Edwardsville campus. What was the reason you switched?
So a couple reasons. One, freshman year, honestly, I was going out to the parties and all that stuff. And like, it's just the atmosphere itself is a lot different than Edwardsville.
Mm-hmm.
So staying focused on things wasn't quite the best for me. And then Lauren, my wife, she was looking at SIUE, and so I checked out the campus. I'm like, I think this is probably a good environment. Then obviously the hit squad was there with Kyle at the time,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, yeah, let's do it.
That is really interesting. That that is like how you meet different people in jiu-jitsu and like you become friends. Because I think back to the last 9 years. I couldn't tell you the longest that we went without training together. Probably during the pandemic was the longest that we went without training together, which was 2 months. But, we literally, when Kyle moved and he started his own gym, It was you, me, my dad, and Josh Vivian, and we trained in my garage all the time.
Yep.
And
yeah,
so
I can't get away from you, man. What the heck?
You can't. You were coming to my garage, so I guess you would probably be following me. So something unique, though, about I think your story. I think there's two things that are really unique, and that really the reason I wanted to bring you on is first that during the whole time from white belt to black belt, you never really quit, right? You never took like a really huge long hiatus, which is super common. And second, you were either full-time working or you were full-time in school the entire time. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. The entire time. Yeah.
And so like, when you're doing that, is that something that you feel like is hard? Is it just something that you did? You know what I mean? Was there, what kind of was, when I'm looking at getting to your black belt, what kind of was the thought process while working or while being in school full time?
Yeah. So basically, time management, obviously. I mean, it's also just setting your priorities straight. So, I know that for me, my goal was to get my bachelor's degree, to go and get a master's degree, and get that job that I wanted to. And so I knew I had to kind of set those in priorities, because jiu-jitsu is always going to be there. And so I always remind myself that if I had maybe a really stressful week of school or something like that, with exams and on top of work and things like that, I might only train maybe once or twice that week. I mean, it wasn't fun. I mean, I really wanted to train, obviously, but it's just having that mindset that jiu-jitsu will always be there, and to just stick with it. And then too, also, I guess almost kind of a sense of like stubbornness in a way, like, of saying, no, I'm going to jiu-jitsu even when I didn't want to. Because there's plenty of times where, I've maybe had a rough day, whether it's with work, school, or whatever, and I'm just mentally fatigued. There's maybe something happened at work, and I don't want to go to practice. I don't want to do it. You know what I mean? And it's just, I want to go home. Maybe I want to crack a beer or something. You know what I mean? But it's like, no, basically telling yourself to shut up, go to practice, train hard, get better. And two, it's just one of those things, because if you're not training, you're not getting better. You kind of get in a sense of, I guess, a little bit of depression to it, And two, as everyone else is getting better, and if you're not there and you come back, you might get a butt whooping.
That is very true. So you're getting, you're kind of going up the ranks. Was there a point where it got easier to stay consistent?
Yeah. I would say it was probably once I got done with school. Honestly, because during graduate school, it was very tough for me, because a lot of my classes were in the evening. And so that's why a lot of times, like, I would train with you and your dad in your garage, because you guys would start about 5 o'clock or so. And then I'd train with you guys, go home, take a shower, and then maybe go to my evening class at night, do schoolwork until late at night. I mean, it was just exhausting.
Yeah.
And then so now it's more of a set schedule. I mean, besides this COVID stuff going on, but when I was in a routine, it's just, I go to work from 8 to 4:30, sometimes maybe a little later, get done, go to practice, don't get home until late, maybe 8 or 9 o'clock, eat dinner, shower, do it all over again. But it's just that routine. When I'm in it, it just feels very comforting, and I'm just used to it.
So was black belt the goal? Was that was that what you were looking at, or was it just the consistency of training that you enjoyed? Was it the progression? What was the thing that you were kind of looking towards that kept you going?
Honestly, in the beginning, the goal was to chase the black belt. Not to say that, like, I'm not happy about getting my black belt. I was ecstatic about it, still ecstatic about it.
Yeah, you cried like a baby.
You had to bring it up.
How ridiculous. I cried a little bit too. I was actually for the people that it's actually on YouTube somewhere, somebody posted it, but when you got your black belt, I was actually able to be the person to put it around your waist, which was super cool. It was and I also, just as a side note, everybody there knew. His parents came, they drove, what is it, 3 hours? They drove 3 hours to come down. He's got no idea, but I had told everybody. And then we were doing belt promotions. It's day one at the brand new gym. As it's going, I had 2 brown belt promotions. I only give one of them. Justin wasn't there. Justin Kitchler wasn't there, but I give one of them, and then I sit everybody down and I start talking about like, we're going to just do an open mat, this gym is really cool. I love how big it is. I said, but the problem with it is like, we get this new gym, everything's cool, everything works there. We have functional bathrooms, we have water fountains, but the problem is it's just going to all be outshined because today Justin's getting his black belt. And oh man, it was perfect. That was such a good setup. Yeah, you cried like a baby. What a baby.
It was solid, man. It was solid. It was very well thought out. Well thought out.
And once you got to that, what was your thought process once you got your black belt?
Well, I mean, obviously getting it, man, like I said, I was not expecting it. You know what I mean? I wasn't. But yeah, I mean, I guess now it's just there's a more of a sense, I think, of accountability that comes with it. Of a sense of like, people are now looking to me, maybe for answers. Not even just like about like sweeps or submissions or something like that, but just more or less of staying consistent. Maybe especially those guys in the gym that are working full time, or maybe are in school. And so they see me doing that, and they managing my time and still showing up for practice. And that I got my black belt, like maybe it can be like some sort of inspiration for others.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little more pressure, I think, with it, a little more pressure, and especially about getting better, at that too.
I think that is huge. That and I always will refer back to people when I'm talking about this, but. You look at you have a black belt, right? You've been training for 10 years and, you get your black belt and you're still at class all the time. You're at every class, right? When people on our team, they look at me, they're like, well, Josh has to be here. You know what I mean? He runs the gym, right? But for you still being a student of Jiu-Jitsu at this point is not something that is a necessity, but people see it, and I think it's such a big motivator for our guys, our team. I really love that, and I really appreciate that. So, as you get into black belt, do you have any kind of next goals or next thoughts? Anything you want to do since you've gotten here?
So definitely competing. It really, it was kind of a damper and stuff with, St. Louis getting canceled for, the IBJJF having their tournament there. But, so at this point, it's just getting better. You know what I mean? Just learning. You know what I mean? Still showing up to class, still learning new things to add to my game. But yeah, eventually I do want to step out there and just kind of dip my toes in the water with black belt, man. Just see what it's all about. It's nerve-wracking, but, I want to try it.
Of course it is, man, because if you lose, we're going to kick you off the team, Like, there are people that say, like, oh, yeah, all my friends, they'll still care whether I win or lose. And that's probably true for everybody else. But we tolerate you enough as it is, Like, if you lose on top of that, I think –
it's just a perfect excuse to just,
You're out the door. Okay. So the most important question before we finish, how were those ribs that you made yesterday?
They weren't bad. They weren't bad. I will say they weren't the best ribs I have cooked.
Really? Why not?
Yeah. The reason being is because with it being so hot yesterday, it can cause temperature swings on your smoker. So I had the dial at 225, and I went outside, and my temp was at like 270 something.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So I had to kind of adjust like midway what I was doing, which was frustrating. And then so when I pulled them out, they were a little bit drier than I was wanting, but I mean they were still good. I mean Laura and I we finished a full rack of ribs and it was a good size, so it wasn't too bad.
Okay. So you went. What was it? Did you say it was 3-2-1 was the method that you used or were going to use?
Well, that's what I've used in the past, but what I went this time was called 3-1-1. And so we're talking 3 hours at 225 on just a nice good smoke, and then 1 hour wrapped at about 225, and then 1 hour unwrapped, and then at the last like 15 minutes or so, you put sauce on it.
What kind of sauce did you use?
I like Bandana's sweet and smoky sauce.
That's a solid choice.
Yeah,
Have you ever made your own barbecue sauce?
I have not. I have
Okay.
not.
So, Chris and Betsy Hagnauer, their dad, I used to train him, and he, like they're like 30 and they still live at home, so he's cooking for a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
And he, and I would always talk recipes and stuff, and he came in one day with this barbecue sauce recipe, and like the two big things, it's very similar to any other barbecue sauce except for two differences. The first one was that you take like a thing of thyme, like a sprig of thyme, and you wrap it in bacon and you cook that down, and that stays in the pot that you're cooking this barbecue sauce in the whole entire time. You try to get as much fat out of the bacon as you can. I think I used like 3 strips of bacon for it, but then it's a normal like ketchup based barbecue sauce. There's molasses, there is apple cider vinegar, onions, some seasonings, but then they don't just sweeten it with sugar. Usually you sweeten it with brown sugar or whatever. They sweetened it with, I want to say it was peach jelly. And dude, it literally, like my mom is not a barbecue person at all. And she likes barbecue as much as she likes meat, right? Which is not very much. And that is like one thing she's always like, you should make your own barbecue sauce. And if you grill like on chicken thighs or on ribs, it is so good. I think it's because it's super sugary, so it really glazes well. And that's something to try. You should get after it.
Yeah,
I'm telling you, it will up your rib game to another level. It's just like John Danaher once said, why would you ignore 50% of the ribs, Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. And too, I mean, I know you've talked too about Kyle and his pig, what to do with it. Let's make some barbecue sauce with it.
How big is your smoker? Could we put the whole pig on the smoker?
It's good size, man. Yeah. Ooh. Yeah, we might.
I mean, I would be down to try it.
Yeah, why not, man? That's just team bonding right there.
All right, Justin, thank you for coming on the show. You're the only person that's going to be on the Perfect Practitioner episode that hasn't gotten a full interview yet, and I think we should make that happen. I'm thinking we should do –
I guess so.
Since I tricked you into coming on for like 15 minutes, so then I could make you commit to a full episode, and I got you. I got you, man.
You did.
All right, man. Thanks again for being on.
All right. Appreciate it, man.
It's always cool to hear that type of interview, right? To I don't know, get to talk to a guy that I've trained with for just so long. I just love that. There are a few people that will be interviewed on the show that literally, I mean, I started at white belt with, and I'd love to just have those conversations and look back on it, because it's interesting to look back and say, man, remember when you first came to the gym? I was a blue belt or whatever, and like Justin and I, we trained together, but until I started training, like we started doing kind of a little private group in my garage. We always called it the Jiu-Jitsu garage. There's about 5 or 6 of us, and Justin was always one of those guys. He lived pretty close to us, and we all trained together, and we all got good together. We all went through blue belt and purple belt and brown belt together. And now, like, he and I and my dad, the 3 of the 6 of us are black belts. One of the other guys is in Long Beach. I don't think he's in Long Beach. I think he lives in Seal Beach, but he lives in LA. He lives in the LA area, Josh Vivian, and he is very close to getting his black belt. He's well on his way to getting his black belt. And so it's cool that, you have those groups. You think back, or you think now, when you're as a white belt or a blue belt, if you stay consistent, there are going to be a few guys that they made it. They finished the journey with you. They finished the race with you. And I think it's really cool to note. But the last interview and the longest interview is with my coach, Kyle. So as you guys know, my coach, Kyle, when I call him and I tell him, hey, I'd love to have you on the show, he immediately is going to say, oh, yeah, I'd love to. I'd be happy to. Let's schedule it. And then when I say, okay, it's just going to be like a 15-minute segment, and then me and Kyle get going, it ends up being way more than a 15-minute segment. It ends up being about 40 minutes. And probably the only reason that stopped the segment was that his wife came down and said, hey, wasn't this supposed to be 15 minutes? But that's okay. That's okay that happened. But we were able to get into some really cool stuff about something technique-wise I think more people have problems with than anything else, and that is stand-up. I think stand-up can be so hard for a few reasons. One, a lot of coaches aren't very good at stand-up. I look at Kyle. He's so much better, so much sharper standing than I am. And I think, and I still have had the privilege to train with so many good stand-up guys, so it was different for me. But so many people, they train at gyms where you start in the knees, whether for safety reasons or whether for space reasons, right? You just start in the knees. You don't do a lot of stand-up. And so, that is something that I think Kyle gives you kind of a jiu-jitsu hack to be good at standing. It takes him 40 minutes to get there, but hey, it's a really good 40 minutes. You guys will really like it. And that's all I have for you guys. Let's get to the next and last interview of the Perfect Practitioner. Kyle, how are you doing today?
Great. I'm great. Yeah, man, ready to do this.
Good. So I decided, a few weeks ago when I realized we're getting on episode 50 of the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, 50, I decided that we should do something different, something innovative, something that's never been done before. So I came up with the idea of doing an episode called The Perfect Practitioner. And in this episode, we kind of get people that I would consider almost specialists or just having a very broad knowledge base about a specific subject pertaining to jiu-jitsu and kind of just talk to them about developing. And for you, I was going to do how to drink more Monster Energy than anybody in the world and punch through more drywall. Your name's Kyle, you drink Monster Energy. I know you punch through drywall all the time. But I realized it didn't pertain to jiu-jitsu as much as takedowns. I think that's something that probably most people struggle with, or more people struggle with in jiu-jitsu than possibly anything else. With that, do you what is kind of just first off, what's your opinion on people having a takedown game, on whether or not they should or what focus they should put on it?
Well, first of all, I think starting off by calling it the Perfect Practitioner or whatever you said, like you're giving me some big shoes to fill here. So, I don't know about expert, but definitely that is a strong field for me. I do think that it's really, really important because even if, let's say, you want to, be on the board first, which we've seen the stats that says, about 75% of the time, the person who scores first wins the match. And that's pretty strong statistics. So even if you didn't want to necessarily be great at takedowns, which I still think you should have some in your back pocket, still be good at a couple, right? In case you go against somebody who's like a really heavy passer and you're worried about the pass of your guard or whatever. Strategically, you might say, I might need to sometimes pull guard, sometimes to be more well-rounded, I need to have a couple of takedowns. I think it's important too, because when you learn takedowns, you also learn how to stop them and kind of what to expect. So even if you want to pull guard, an understanding of the takedown game is still important. And one thing, like I probably talked about before on maybe either other podcasts or just with you in general, is my old coach had a good saying and always said that, if I can get into my best scoring position as quickly as possible, and like, let's say I get 2 on the board, now it's not just me against you, it's me and the clock against you. And the reason why that's so important is that people are much more willing to take risks and expose themselves when they know the clock is winding down. So if you get up on the board, now you can slow the game down or stall, if you will. And, and then that person is going to have to start taking more risks, and those risks will expose them to other things. And then you can get on the board even further and possibly submit them and what have you. So I think it's very important. But like I said, whether you're a guard puller or you want to be good at takedowns, I think it's key to be well-rounded, to be able to do both. You don't have to be an expert at both, but be well-rounded,
That makes sense. And you really, when it comes to game planning, you can't game plan from the feet if you have no stand-up. If I only can pull guard, and I know that, my game planning potential becomes much more limited. Like I am, even if I know that this guy sucks off of his back, I can't do anything about it. I still have to pull. I mean, I can sweep, but with having that takedown game, I think can be so important. And then from the other side of the coin, from a self-defense perspective, not having to jump guard in a street fight would probably be something important for a fighter, for getting or for in a self-defense situation. But let's start at the beginning. Let's say that you, or let's say that I am I'm a little bit even better at jiu-jitsu. I'm a blue belt or I'm a purple belt, but I feel as though I have no stand-up game. When I first started, I learned guard and I just kind of hung on to it. I realized that the guys that have some wrestling experience, I can't hang with on the feet. So I just pull guard all the time. I don't work it, but now I'm getting to a point where I want to. What would be just your first kind of layer of advice for somebody like that?
Yeah, I jotted down some notes, and I have a couple that I feel very, very strongly about. And I think the first thing would be, just like anything else, like if you liken it to starting with jiu-jitsu, you learn a couple of basic moves, okay? And then in the beginning, you just kind of learn those moves and then kind of where they would fit into the rest of the puzzle. And then, of course, you have to work on timing. But I think it's really important to start off with like really basic things, like basic movements. And I think that a lot of people are scared off by wrestling because either if they've worked with wrestlers before or they've seen wrestling, they're like, well, I'm not that athletic. I'm not that explosive. And a lot of times when you think of like big double legs and single legs, or if you watch any MMA and you think of wrestling, it's like, oh, like I'm not that athletic. I'm not that explosive. So I think it's starting off with just maybe a couple of takedowns that don't require as much athleticism, don't require, a lot of explosiveness, and that are pretty low risk. And so I would say starting off with simple moves that somebody that is a non-wrestler or someone who doesn't have much wrestling experience could still effectively pull off on somebody who might even be a wrestler. And that would be like arm drags, collar drags, trip takedowns, just trips. Snap down. If I snap someone down, now their back's exposed and I didn't even actually have to wrestle them. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So those 4, there's more, but those are the 4 that come to mind that are like, I feel like non-wrestler takedowns. You know what I mean? Arm drag. I mean, obviously wrestlers do them too, but I'm just saying arm drag, collar drag, snap down, trips are pretty easy. And I would say start off with something like that. So you don't feel like, man, I'm already kind of have a barrier to get into the game because, I don't want people to think, well, I don't want to wrestle because I don't think that I would be good at it, or I've tried it before and I shot him for a takedown and I got stuffed and they immediately get defeated. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my first thing. I have more layers, but let me know kind of.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a really good idea on it because by creating those angles, which pretty much all those, obviously you create a little bit different of an angle on a snap down, but I think all 4 of those things you are ways to take people down without having to deal with their hips. And I think that's one of the toughest things is you go in and you try to learn to take somebody down and you deal with somebody athletic, somebody strong, or especially somebody that has a really strong deadlift and then they hip into you and, you know what I mean, your face just smashes the mats. And with those tatami style mats that I have at my gym, you're going to need plastic surgery after that. And so I think that makes really good sense, that starting out with takedowns that kind of win the angle battle, so you don't have to run into that athleticism as much. Do you think that somebody could build a game off just those style of takedowns?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Especially initially, and you're hitting the nail on the head with that, because you really are like, all of those like really bypass the hips altogether. They kind of go around the hips. You know what I mean? And I agree with you completely. But I do believe that, at least in the beginning, it's kind of like I keep comparing to jiu-jitsu, because I think they should be kind of seamlessly integrated and work. And if somebody already has a little bit of understanding how you learn jiu-jitsu, or how your coach teaches you jiu-jitsu, then I think you can implement a lot of those same strategies with learning takedowns. And I think eventually you'll want to move into, I think in the beginning, those takedowns will get you pretty far. But then as you go with better and better people, you're going to need more in the arsenal. And that's when you would start to move to like low single, regular singles and doubles, maybe like Russian tie, maybe like Uchimata. There's a few throws too that become you'll want to put into your game as well. But honestly, I think a good strong like body lock takedown is good as well. I mean, that's good. I mean, they don't always work, especially with the gi. It's harder to get close to the body, but still a good understanding of that is important. So I think starting with those simple ones first, and then kind of hitting some of the other layers I'll talk about, and then kind of backfilling and starting to add as you get better and start to face better competition. You're going to need to start to branch out and have more tricks up your sleeve. And I also think one thing that I want to jump back real quick back on that, where we talked about being well-rounded. I think that also, when we talk about things like in jiu-jitsu, where, hey, learn a couple leg locks to complement your passing game, where you can use passes to set up leg locks and leg locks to set up passes. I think it's great to have the same thing when you're pulling guard versus doing takedowns, because sometimes you can go for a takedown and then, or maybe even fake it, and that's a good setup for a guard pull, or vice versa, fake the guard pull and then right into an ankle pick. You know what I mean? So I think that's a little bit more down the road of getting a little more sophisticated and having, but I'm just saying that will help you down the road to be more well-rounded, because you'll be able to blend those two together, and you don't have to be labeled like, oh, this guy's just a guard puller, or this guy's just a takedown person, even though
that makes sense. Like use your knee weave pass to set up your knee cut, right? And are you sorry? Wait, is it leg weave or knee weave? It's a knee weave. Knee weave, right? Yeah. Both DVDs available on bjjfanatics.com. But yeah, you can use things hand in hands, and takedowns are one of those things. So just before we get into kind of your next layer, how would you go about training those? So let's say we're learning the collar drag. How would you go about training them? Would you drill it? Would you go into live training? Would you kind of, what would be your thought process if you've never done stand up before?
Sure. Just like another move, you need to understand the mechanics. So I'd start off like where you can do the move effectively without hurting your partner, because with takedowns, obviously there's an elevation and bodies are going to be like hitting the floor and what have you. So, showing someone how to do the move safely, and then slowly increasing speed. But one thing that has to go hand in hand with learning the move is a little bit of grip fighting. Now, grip fighting in its own right is kind of like its own game. Similar to, like, you can say like leg locks is like it's almost a whole art to itself. Well, same thing with grip fighting. You wouldn't want to make it so complicated where people get like lost, but just having them understand the simplicity of like, okay, understand that if you go to a tournament and you watch a bunch of white belts, that they just both lock on Frankenstein arms and then they just try to pull until someone falls down. You got to understand that one of the keys to being able to be effective at takedowns is managing the grip fight. So if I was going to teach someone the collar drag or the arm drag, I would want to make sure that they knew how to properly intercept their opponent's grips. And then if they missed that, how to break the grip off so that they could get back on track. So I think I would definitely want to go those hand in hand, just a little bit of grip fighting. And then once they know, okay, I can do a proactive setup and a reactive setup. I think that's really important. And what I mean by that is, if I went out and I said, I'm going to get this grip on you or this non-grip and set up my takedown, I'm going to go out there and do it proactively. But then if I go out there and you get a grip first, how would I negate that and then still set up my takedown? So like a proactive entry and a reactive entry, and then just drill it off those two over and over and over, and then start to increase the speed, because timing is so huge. It's kind of like, don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but you know how like you see when you show somebody a move and they drill it, and in their head they're like, oh, I totally understand this move. I've got it. I just drilled it. Josh made me drill it 40 times. And then they go and roll, and then they never hit it. And they kind of feel defeated. And why is that? It's because a lot of times people go from 0 resistance to 100% resistance with nothing in the middle. Okay. So the problem is their timing hasn't been effectively worked. So what I think you need to do is incrementally increase the resistance a little bit, and then have them start to say, okay, similar to what they would say like flow grappling, where it's like, hey, you and I are going like 50%, we catch a submission, let it go, keep going. Then you need to do the same thing with stand-up. And you need to do like flow wrestling, where it's like, okay, we're going to work on our setups and our footwork and our timing. It's like, if I get your leg, I pick it up, act like I'm going to take you down, I let it go, then you go and you hit a setup, and then we go back and forth. And I think that really helps a lot with the timing and the footwork. And I think that's such an important intermediate step that people don't do. They usually just go from static drilling to live, and then they don't understand why it doesn't work, and they get defeated.
So do you think it would be best to, you started out when you named 4 moves. Do you think it would be best to try to focus on all 4, or one or 2, or what would kind of be your thought process on that?
I think 1 or 2. And I think one reason why, I think it's kind of like, like we always say, don't be jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing. It's better to be, I would rather be super, super good at like 3 takedowns than crappy at 15. You know what I mean? And if anybody watches my takedown game, I usually only do like the same 2 or 3 takedowns. You know what I mean?
Or one, for that matter.
Or one.
Or one. But we won't name that because
right.
You guys can't know about it, but it works 100% of the time.
Well, funny story about that. Jared Weiner, our coach, our association leader, he messaged me a while back, and he was like looking for things to kind of like keep the enthusiasm, and he was like trying to put together some clips. He goes, hey, Watts, he's like, you have any submissions at black belt you can send me? And I'm like sitting there thinking about it, and I remember a few submissions I've hit, but they weren't videotaped. And I'm like, you know what? I don't think I have any. I was
no.
I have a few that I know I submitted. And I even remembered a couple like in New York, and I remember like a couple of them. I'm like, man, they weren't on videotape. And I'm like, gosh, man, I have such a low finishing percentage at black belt. But I was like, but my takedown percentage is extremely high.
High.
I said, I think I was looking back, and I think in my 2018, 2019, all of the tournaments, I think there was only a couple matches I didn't get a takedown. But that being said, so I said, well, hey, if you do a montage of takedowns, I got plenty of stuff to give to you. And he wasn't biting. He was like,
submissions are all that matters. Apparently, he asked me the same thing. I only had 1 recorded. I mean, I have only been a black belt for like a year and some change, but still, I only had 1 recorded. I think that was my first open class match of the Kansas City Open. And really, I mean, it was just like a back take to a bow and arrow.
Did it make the clip?
I don't think so. I mean, not that I wasn't tagged in anything.
No,
did he already post it?
Yeah, a while ago. I've been a black belt for 9 years now, and I have like hardly any submissions. So so anyway, but yeah, you didn't bring me on here to talk about my submission percentage. But anyway, I just thought that was funny because he asked me. I sat there and thought about it. I'm like, damn it, I can't contribute.
Yeah, you know what? You're here to contribute on takedowns. Okay, so now as we kind of progress, where should you go next? You're starting to build this takedown game. What would be your thought next?
Well, here's a thing too that I think would kind of go in tandem with that, and it's a very important. It's you might say, why wouldn't this be first? And I'm not saying it can't be first, but it's just like people kind of need to, like, first, people can't really understand the why. If they're brand new, they need a little bit of how first, and then they can start to understand the why. But I always talk about this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy where, like, takedowns a lot of times, it's kind of hard to explain, but I think once I kind of lay it out, it makes sense. Is that what happens is a lot of people have tried takedowns and failed, and then they're like, I didn't like that feeling. I didn't want to be under the person. So then just that fear of like, I don't want my takedown to fail will make them either not shoot or they'll shoot half-hearted. And the problem is if you shoot half-hearted, then it's more likely that it'll fail. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I see that so much where people will think that the setup has to be absolutely perfect or they won't go for it. Or they'll be like, they're in their head, they will not have the confidence, so they'll shoot half-hearted, and then it will definitely fail. So my old coach used to always say, he goes, man, I just believe in my takedowns. When I am in the bullpen, I'm getting ready, I just say to myself over and over and over, I can take every single person down that is in my bracket. I can take every single one of them down, and not only can I'm going to. And just telling yourself that. So in the beginning, I know that people aren't going to have that confidence, but the idea of like being like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen is my takedown doesn't work. So a lot of times, I know it sounds crazy, and I just talked about like not like worrying about athleticism a lot, but a lot of times just the conviction of shooting with confidence and going really hard and keep driving, a lot of times you can make up the lack of technique with like just kind of sheer violence. You know what I mean? Like, just if you just shoot in with a decent entry and you say, I'm not going to stop driving until either A, the takedown is completed, or B, it's completely sprawled upon, a lot of times just that conviction will give you the takedown alone. Because I've had so many times, just myself, like, back to my background really quickly, I didn't wrestle in high school. I didn't wrestle in college. I only started wrestling when I started doing MMA. And I even still to this day would not argue that I'm a good wrestler. I would say I'm a mediocre wrestler. But what gives me the edge over a lot of other people is that I am willing to shoot and I don't care. Like, I'm willing to shoot and I do not care. And that'll get to another layer in a second, talking about turtle defense and back take defense. But I think it just goes such a long way of just understanding that, like, what's the worst thing that happens? I know in a tournament, yes, you can lose. But when you're in the gym, the worst thing that happens is you get your back taken, or you get in the crucifix, or whatever. You come back up, you do it again. And over time, you work on – that's the only way that you can truly work on your timing and your ability to keep driving and chain wrestle, is to have that conviction. So anyway, that's kind of the layer, is just telling people that you will fail more often on your takedown, not necessarily because the technique was poor, but probably more likely because you didn't have the confidence in the shot. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense to me. That I think that so often I'll still go in to shoot, and while I'm getting ready to take the shot, I am thinking, man, I'm so annoyed that I'm about to be sprawled on. You know, like, you just there is like a level of confidence. And that's like, I think, knowing a good takedown, like knowing something that's high percentage. So you touched on just that your next layer is going to be dealing with kind of like getting your back taken. I assume like front headlock on kind of failed shots. Is that where you think people should go to next?
Absolutely. So it's hard because, like, there's so many things to work in jiu-jitsu, and then we say, okay, I want to get good at wrestling too. It's like, okay, it's like two completely different disciplines that can take your whole life to master and never even completely master it. So that's why you don't tackle both arts in their entirety. It's just impossible. So you just got to break it up into, like, things that like smaller nuggets that you can absorb. And I think that, whether you want to do them simultaneously, like working like turtle defense and back take defense and takedowns, that just depends on what kind of time you have for the gym. But I think that is so crucial, because that was I'm glad you asked that, because that was going to be like the next layer, is like, where would that conviction and where would that confidence in my shots come from? And for me personally, the confidence comes because I've been in that position. I've put myself in that position so many times, especially with MMA, that I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it because I feel like I have an answer. I feel like I've spent so much time in the front headlock that I know I'll either peek out, arm drag, or I'll be able to create a stand up again. And then I've spent a ton of time on back take defense, both from the turtle and then when someone actually gets hooks in, so that if they take my back, I'm not like freaking out. Yeah, obviously I don't want them to get the score, but I've been there enough that like, you know, like in competition, I rarely ever get my back taken. And it's not because, oh man, I'm so good, I don't ever get my back taken. It's more just that I've just put myself in that bad position so often that I just rarely let the hooks get in, and I feel confident there. So I think, like I said, depending on the time you have, if you can work those two things in tandem, that would be great. But almost, I think having a good turtle defense, front headlock defense, and then good back defense would almost be better to have that on the forefront, because then when you go into takedowns, you're already like, man, I can shoot with conviction because I'm not worried about what's going to happen next. And like I said, that's usually why people don't shoot, is they've been there before. They've shot and then they've gotten their back taken. They've shot and they've got guillotined. Or they've shot and got anaconda choked or put in a crucifix, and they're like, well, I don't want that to happen again. I'll just not do that. You know, it's easier to pull guard. But if you – and think about whatever all the other areas that being great at turtle and back take defense is going to help you at. You all of a sudden, guess what? Your guard retention and recovery is going to be better. Why? Because if someone's passing your guard, there's so many guard recovery tools where you expose your back, right? To get your guard back. Well, if all of a sudden you're like, I'm not scared to expose my back, you're much more willing to stop the guard pass. You're more capable to stop the guard pass because you have more tools in the tool set to stop the guard pass because you're not worried about your guard or your back getting taken. So does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. That is, I think that is an example for people that haven't wrestled before that they can really comprehend. I say the same thing about bottom side control is if you're good at defending bottom side control, you are going to be a lot more comfortable throwing up triangles from your guard, because you know it's not a death sentence. And I think it's so important for people to recognize that front headlock, especially, and I think maybe it's because, you know, we may be able to understand it a little more. We've always had the luxury of training with good wrestlers, you know, just the area that we're in. And then when we were at the Hit Squad, it was very common to train with good wrestlers, most of which, even if I started on a sprawled front headlock, would still finish a takedown. You know what I mean? And I think that that's a really important thing for people to note, is that it is also a technical, important position to get good at.
Absolutely. Yeah. And plus it's just so much more important too. Like, I think that since jiu-jitsu and wrestling are so complex themselves, I think when you spend time on areas or on things that will help you in many areas, you basically save time. Like you can, you know, when you can kill, multiple birds with one stone, so to speak. Like, so if I say to you, hey, Josh, if you focus on working really hard on your turtle defense and your back take defense, and that will not only eventually help you with your takedowns, and it'll also help you with your guard retention and recovery. So those are two completely different things that'll help you with. Wouldn't you want to spend your time working on something that'll improve you in multiple areas versus just one? And so I think that's really important. But back to the grand scope of things is like, yeah, like I would say work a couple of like, basic low risk, high percentage takedowns, work a little bit of grip fighting, movement and stance footwork by doing that with, just kind of flow wrestling a little bit. And then also working your turtle and back take defense. And that kind of gets me to the last layer is like, let's say you've already kind of, not that there's not more layers, but these are just the main ones that come to mind. Then the next step and the more advanced step would be the way you combine things. And so now you have to turn it into chain wrestling. Okay. It's kind of like when you learn, when you're new to jiu-jitsu and you learn like an individual move. Okay. It's like, here's the arm bar and here's when you'll use it. Or here's the triangle. Here's when you can use it. Here's the omoplata. Here's when you use it. But look at that relationship between the omoplata and the triangle. It just depends on which way the arm is facing. If the arm's facing forward, it's a triangle. If it's facing backwards, a normal plata. And you teach them that when they defend one, the other one is readily available. And then that's how I want them to learn the wrestling. It's like a lot of times you shoot in for a double, they stuff it a little bit, but guess what? Now you have a single leg. Or, you run the pipe on a single leg, and then they don't go down, and you change it into a bars agar or a double leg. You know what I mean? So there's just learning it where, so, okay, once you get good at a couple and you learn how to, okay, I'm decent at those. I can hit them in practice on people my level that are maybe the same size. And then you start saying, okay, coach, I keep doing this takedown, but now I'm going with somebody who's, we're really competitive and he's stuffing it, or I'm going with somebody slightly better and they're stuffing it. And then I just kind of one and done. And now I'm tired. It doesn't work, Then it comes just like I was saying before. If I throw a triangle and you defend it, do I just stop and be like, well, that didn't work, I'll just let my guard get past? No, you switch to an omoplata, or you switch to, a Barado plata or a wrist lock or whatever, So with the wrestling, you learn, okay, well, with their most common defense, that sets me up for the next move and the next move. And so you learn to chain wrestle the same way that you would chain passes together, the same way you would chain leg locks together, the same way you would, chain different submissions together. So that would be the next step, and probably the most complicated. It's understanding when one move has failed, and now I have the timing to hit the second move. And then so chaining wrestling moves together. So chain wrestling, and then like we said before, the other advanced thing that you can move to is chaining guard pulls and takedowns together. So that would be that last more complicated layer.
That makes really good sense, Kyle. That I think that is such a good layer for the perfect practitioner, somebody who's wanting to get good at stand-up. I think there's a ton of information just in that segment. Is there anything you want to say to finish?
Well, just kind of looking at just a quick reiteration is just kind of putting it back together, because that was a lot of stuff we talked about. And it's just kind of looking at don't try to tackle that all at once. It's kind of saying hey, listen, I'm going to, and understand you still have to, there's still technical knowledge you need to possess, and you still need to learn from your training partners and your coaches. So it's not like, okay, Kyle said, learn the simple takedown and you magically learn it. You still have to go and ask your coach, hey, can you show me an arm drag? Can you show me a collar drag? Can you show me a trip? Can you show me a snap down? And then just pick one or two of them. And I think arm drag and collar drag is a great first one to start with. Why? Because it's the same movement, but you can do it gi and no gi. You know what I mean? And start with that and learn, okay, what's the best setup? Maybe I have a reactive entry and I have a proactive entry. And then I start having my partner increase the resistance. And then I start, I start doing it with more and more conviction. I start having more and more confidence. Then I start simultaneously, or maybe before that, start working on my turtle defense and my back take defense. And then once I feel confident in those couple areas, I start saying, okay, let's add to my takedown arsenal and start working on takedowns that work in tandem with the ones I'm already good at. And that, I think, would sum up kind of my layers to get someone going.
I absolutely love it, Kyle. I think that's a really good. We went longer than I had hoped, but I think that it's a lot better than I had hoped it would be. I think it's really good stuff. And even though we're over on time, I had to tell you a quick story, Kyle. This is important. This doesn't pertain at all to getting good at takedowns and jiu-jitsu, but I feel like there's nobody in the world that would appreciate this story more than you.
Okay.
So I have new neighbors that live across the street from me. I haven't met them yet. I'm not a very nice neighbor, so I haven't went over and said hi to them. So I don't know. They could be great people. They could be horrible people that sacrifice goats in their basement. I have no idea. Right. But what I do know is what I can see. They're a front yard type of family. Okay. They're not, they have a privacy fence in the backyard. I don't know if they're ever even in there, because they're always in their front yard. Okay. And they're always doing something. Something I've noticed over the past 3 weeks that they've lived there is the guy that lives there. He always is wearing flip-flops. Okay. And that's not, Yeah,
I like
I know.
that.
And so this is why I thought you would appreciate this.
Okay.
It's warm outside, so it makes sense to be wearing flip-flops. It's not a big deal. But he's also pretty into motorcycles, pretty into fixing up his car. And he's always wearing flip-flops while he is working on motorcycles, while he's working on his car, which I find to be probably borderline dangerous. I don't know a lot about cars, but I think that's a bad idea. Well, the other day, Saturday, I am sitting on my couch and I can see out of the window that is open. I always leave the window open so my dog can stare out because he loves just staring at people.
Sure.
I can see that my neighbor is on the roof. Okay.
In flip-flops.
In flip-flops. He is wearing flip-flops, and I kid you not, I got some pictures. I kid you not, he has 2 4x4s, one on each shoulder, on his roof with flip-flops on. I have never been more impressed by anything in my life. I immediately called my dad, and I was like, dude, you are not going to believe this. And
I kind of take this as a challenge.
dude, okay, so then I'm not kidding. I don't know what he did with these 2x4s. They're still, or these 4x4s. They're still on his roof. I don't know what the reason behind it was. It didn't make sense to me. But they're still up there.
Sure.
He gets off of his roof. He puts his ladder away, still flip-flops on. He gets on his motorcycle, and he drives away.
Wow.
Dude,
That is impressive.
He's more flip-floppy than you are.
Well, here's the thing is, when I used to live in the city and I was like mowing, we had kind of like a rounded front of the lawn. I was mowing and I was mowing flip-flops. And then one time Laura had somebody come in the ER who was mowing with flip-flops, fell, foot went right under, chopped the top of his foot off, like the instep, cut his instep off.
Ooh.
So I started being like, yeah, maybe that's the one time I don't wear flip-flops is maybe mowing after that. But
he wears flip-flops mowing. That was the first time that I put together that, like, wow, this guy wears flip-flops a lot. Like, I saw him mowing his grass, and I'm like, whoa, he's wearing – do people do that? Like, I mean, I don't mow my own grass. Actually, right now, while we are talking about this, I have somebody mowing my grass that I can see, and I hope that they're not getting picked up on my microphone. But they're wearing tennis shoes. Everybody I've ever had mow my grass wears tennis shoes.
It's probably the smart thing to do.
Yeah, and so that is the story that I wanted to leave you with, Kyle. Thank you so much for being on.
Well, I appreciate it. I appreciate you asking me. I hope people got something out of it. You know how, I'll leave you with some. You know how I like dad jokes a lot, right?
Of course, I know you love
this whole with this whole lockdown and quarantine. I've been limited to inside jokes.
Oh, Kyle. I guess we can cut that part out. I don't know. All right, man. Thank you for being on.
You bet. Have a great day.
You too. And there was your third and final interview, third and final lecture, third and final. I like interview. Interview sounds so much better than lecture. Lecture sounds boring. Third and final interview on the I Suck at Jiu-Jitsu show, episode 50, spectacular, The Perfect Practitioner. I hope you guys enjoyed that. I hope you guys liked the format for that. I think that was fun for me because I think it just dug in, made me have to be a little more creative, do a little bit different stuff. So it was cool. And those are 3 people I just absolutely love talking to. So it was cool to get to talk to them. And so I think we're getting to a point where I'm feeling like I know what this show should be about. And besides just jiu-jitsu, right? And the type of people I like to interview and the type of people I like to talk to, the type of things I like to tell you guys and focus on myself and experiment on myself. And so I think the next 50 episodes will be even better. I hope they will. I hope you guys will enjoy them. I hope you guys will check out Simplifying Jiu-Jitsu. That is bjjsucks.com/simple. Free ebook, free audiobook, all yours. I want you to have it out of the goodness of my heart and because I think it is lacking in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You guys will absolutely love it. Like I said, I hope you guys loved the episode, and I hope that you guys suck just a little bit less at Jiu-Jitsu.